in secondary school when I was about 15, and I stayed up all night and went to school the next morning, and I remember the English teacher said to me, "This is a really good story, one day you'll be a writer." And then life got in the way. I became an English teacher, so I was teaching other people how to write. I did a master's degree in Australian literature, and it was only after I came home from Spain that I really felt I had the time and perhaps the motivation to dedicate to telling my story. And the story that I was writing went through 2 agents, numerous acquisition meetings, and eventually became published on the 4th of February by Allen & Unwin, who are the largest independent publisher in Australia. So here I am. And the book's called The Love That Remains.
In case you didn't know. Well, my journey's been a little different. I grew up way out in the country and spent a lot of time reading because it was my only access to the world. So I desperately wanted to be Anne of Green Gables when I was a little girl, so I was always writing stories. But then again, life got in the way and I ended up being a lawyer, and I was a lawyer for 10 years, and I just completely lost my soul as a lawyer. I just lost the wonder and the magic that I'd had as a child. But during that 10 years I had 3 small children, and that helped me remember. And so I started writing books, really for myself. I started writing Emerald Child, and it was very nostalgic and Narnian, and that just got bigger and bigger, and I thought, to the point where I thought, maybe I could actually get this published. And I never had thought about that before. I never thought, well, I could actually be a writer. It didn't seem to be a career for me. I think growing up in the country with a father who said, you know, writing books is like winning the lottery, you're never going to get published. So I was always thinking, well, that's not a real job. But then I sent Emerald Child off to Random House Penguin, and they were going to publish it. So I thought, well, this could actually happen. And I think it's what's called the slow no. So they held on to it for 18 months. We had lots of meetings, we had lots of back and forth. But in that time, what it was good for, even though their marketing committee said no in the end, which was devastating. While I was going through that process, I wrote the second book in the series. And then I sort of stepped away from it and went, hang on, I don't need a publisher, I can do this myself. I met a guy in America who was publishing his own books and making lots of money out of it. And I thought, I'm going to do this myself. So I did, and I haven't looked back actually. It's been amazing. Great.
Hi, I grew up in Newcastle. I was really privileged as a young person. I went to a great school, and they had a thing called creative writing through the media that they invented just for our sort of year. And I was in this little group for year 9 and 10. I was, on the magazine committee. I was, there doing stuff. But I always thought I'd be a mathematician. Everyone thought I'd be a mathematician. But life progressed, and after, kids and not good health post children, I ended up in an arts degree. I was really nurtured. Newcastle University really nurtured me in my writing. I wanted to write B-grade science fiction, and I was really emphatic about the B grade. I wanted to write the stainless steel rat because I loved it, that sort of thing. And I was then, told that I should really understand James Joyce, and that if I really want to be a writer, I should, get this experience, which I'm really glad I did. But one of the things that going through that process taught me was that in the end, the artist is the creator, and you have the right to choose how your work is presented in the world. And independent publishing does that. So way back before we had independent publishing, I was doing independent projects around a national writing competition, published an anthology. I sold over 1,200 copies of an anthology of short fiction from a writing competition, which hadn't really been heard of, because I rang around and said, how many printing should I print? And people going, 50, 100? We never sell more than 100. So that was my first taste. And I did that through traditional offset printing, and we did everything. Publishing houses were closing down, and so at that time there was had access to some really, really talented people just coming out of the traditional publishing industry, and they helped me. And in the middle of that, a group of us got together online and were griping about the fact that in Australia we only had literary speculative fiction journals, and we wanted to start something different. So we started a thing called Andromeda Spaceways In-Flight magazine, which was the longest running paper publication that we had for a quarterly for a really, really long time. It was paper publication for over 15 years.
And what did it feature?
It was speculative fiction with a twist. It allowed people to submit everybody could submit to a slush pool. We had a team of people who would go through and read the slush, and then we would make a selection, and it was all kind of with a grading system, and people would recommend articles or stories from the slush into the magazine. Each issue had about 10 to maybe 15 stories in it, and it was a really good way for a number of people who are now quite active in the Australian speculative fiction writing scene to actually get heard and voices. So that's another thing that micro-presses and small presses and community-based presses have really helped. It makes this place where people can present their work. So this was all starting in the end of, in the 2000s, and then I had my fourth child, and I did a PhD, and now I'm here, growing up children and going, oh, there's my computer, I can write again. So that's pretty much my life in a nutshell.
Fantastic. All right. So, Susan, tell us a little bit about the little journey you've been on over the last couple of months. You have been talking about your memoir to so many different folk, and I'd be interested, just as a woman who's recently published, and it's been a fabulous book. It's been so well received. What's that been like? Is it all a blur? Do you realise you're in Maitland today? Let's hear from a woman who's just fresh off the press, so to speak, of the book tour, the book promotional tour. How's it going?
Well, it's going very well, but I'm exhausted. It is like a train, and you get on the train, and your publicist, you go to Sydney, or Canberra, or Melbourne, your publicist meets you for a coffee in the morning, you get into a taxi, you go to the first media event, and many of the questions have become, to me, they begin to sound the same to me, and I have responses that sound the same. So I find that I kind of hear myself and I think, God, there you go again, saying the same thing, But they remind me that every audience is new, and you've also got to keep a consistent line. You just can't, because it's a memoir, so I can't be making stuff up. I've got to be responding in the same way. So many of the questions are the same, which is what I found so nice here yesterday, because it was more of a community thing and people who were interacting, and there were different questions being asked, not the same questions that I'm being asked on radio and TV. So what's it been like? It's just, it's a switch. And there's me in the morning having a coffee in my dressing gown, and then there's me 9 o'clock down in Broadway, something that's called face-to-camera makeup. Make sure, Susan, you have your face-to-camera makeup. I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm 58 years old, my face-to-camera makeup. So that's what it's been like. So I just switch it on and I switch it off. And it's I couldn't be on the whole time, because it's, there's certain expectations that people have, and there's time limits, and there's every interviewer, even though they're asking me the same questions, they have a different take on the story. So I'll be really I've got big interviews this week. I've got the Newcastle Writers Festival. I've got a book tour down in Victoria. What I'm really looking forward to is I've got about 2 weeks off in the next couple of weeks just to sit behind my desk and get back to my computer and write in the quiet. That's what I really, I'm longing for that.
We were just talking about earlier that, you get so involved in the writing process and you're so worried about letting go of your work that you've written and it takes you years, but you don't really think about what comes next and how challenging it is to actually get out there.
It's a different set of skills.
Yeah, it is, and you have to put on a marketing hat and it's a steep learning curve, either if you're picked up by a publishing company and they take you everywhere, or if you have to organise that yourself. And it's totally different to what you would imagine.
Yes, well, the energy that has to go into the promotion marketing.
Yeah, I have to say the strangest thing that ever happened to me was there was a period like I was a stable writer for Australian Christian Woman. It was a Christian magazine. I had a readership of over 15,000 every 2 months, and they'd occasionally send me out to a thing. And people are sort of like asking me these questions, like these intimate questions, or these, and they wanted to know, and it felt like, I go home and I cook dinner for the kids just like you do. I'm not actually really special, you're really special, because you're taking what I'm saying and you're making this your world. You're making a world from the little bits of wisdom that I can possibly help you with. And that's what I found. It was really odd. It's like I'm a different person because you need me to be a different person.
I imagine that would be especially with a memoir.
Yeah, so Susan was talking earlier about parts of her book being focused on more than others, which she was quite surprised at. Do you want to chat about that?
Yeah. So a lot of people are making a big deal about the fact that I'm so honest in the book.
That's a really big deal.
Yeah, it is. I don't, to me personally, it's not a big deal. It's just my story. And I really respond to what you're saying, Julie. People are looking at me like I'm something special. I'm not. I've just told my story. And there's hundreds, thousands of women who were adopted. There's hundreds, thousands of women who've lost their husband. There's hundreds, thousands of women who've found out secrets about their husband afterwards, who've lost their house, who've lost their money. The only difference between them and me is that I've written it down. So when people say to me, you're so brave, you're so this, you're so that, I actually feel like a fake because I don't feel I am. It just happened. And what are you going to do? You have to get through it. And I was just lucky enough to be able to write about it and have it published. So that's how I
Did
feel
you
about
ever
it.
expect, things I've noticed is some of the questions...
Speak up, please.
Some of the questions that the reporters have been asking you
Have been quite grilling and quite. I've just sat there, going about my house, listening to a lot of radio interviews, even the ABC, which I would have thought would be a little bit more delicate or respectful, in the way they deliver the questions. There was one program that these questions came at you like boom, 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 like a machine gun. And I'm just wondering how did you expect that, and how do you cope with that if it's come as a bit of a surprise, or did your agent or publisher support you and help you with that? And then if the other two of you want to talk a little bit about going out and hunting and going out with that promotion, and any other aspects about the exposure.
So I think as a woman, bringing it back to that, because I tutor at the night time, so I'm kind of semi-retired, I'm nearly 60, I have the space to be able to take a month off or 2 months off and go out. And we've all talked about the world getting in our way, or work getting in our way, or children getting in our way in the nicest possible way. First thing is I've been able to get out and do it. And that's, I think, a very big thing that is not considered very often. So I say to my publicist, she says, can you come down next week for Mamma Mia? And I go, of course I can come down next week for Mamma Mia. 300,000, listeners, of course I'm going to come down. I will do anything it takes to get the book out there and get the book sold, because it's going to time to be able to do that, because she will say to me, oh, you're a publicist dream, Susan, you're a publicist dream, because a lot of people don't have that opportunity to get out and get down there and do it. But very interestingly, I did that podcast with Mamma Mia this week, and it went for nearly an hour and a half. And I actually cried 3 times in that interview, which I have not done before. And I don't think her questions were harder, because some of the questions have been very hard. I don't think the questions were harder. She gave me the space to put the story in context. And if there's one thing I'm disliking about it, people will take a grab. They'll put 3 minutes of it on television, or they'll take a bit of the first chapter and they'll put that into the newspaper. And people form really strong opinions about that tiny little bit. You can't, I don't think it's fair. The whole book is the context, and you can't take one thing out of context and then make a judgment about the action or what's happened in the story. I find that probably more difficult. I actually like the opportunity to explain it, because then people can't take it out of context or make these judgments.
If you've got any comments about that, and also the juggle of life.
Yeah, well, I could comment on the juggle of life. I write for 9 to 12-year-olds. Well, that's my Collector Magic series, and so my interaction with the public has been lots of kids mostly. So I go out into schools, I run writing workshops, and that's a very different audience. So it's not the personal. It's probably easier, but then at the same time, kids are incredibly direct, and they want to know exactly why'd you write this, and also they believe what you've written. So if there's magic in there, they want to talk about the magic. So that connection with the public, I think for me, has been wonderful and has actually contributed to my writing more and more magical things. But I haven't so much had the personal, because I write speculative fiction, so I haven't really had that much of a personal exposure as I think. So you've got to be aware of what you're writing, I suppose. If you're writing memoirs, you have to be prepared to answer the really hard questions. If you're writing for kids, you have to be prepared to go and deal with children. And children can be very challenging, but very, very rewarding.
And just before we leave you, the corporate lawyer career and now this,
Quite different.
would it have been done together? Would there have been, when you think about it now?
It was a very different headspace, I think. While I was a lawyer, I was writing, but to put the energy into the actual marketing and the writing full-time as a novelist and going out into schools, I definitely have had time to continue being a lawyer. It probably would have been more stable income. But I think particularly in indie marketing, you can make it work for you. You have to treat it as a business. I have a publishing company because I was a business lawyer. I had trusts set up and all sorts of things. You don't need to do that, mate. You don't need. But you do need to be business savvy about it. So,
Even with a publisher behind me, I can spend a whole day on social media, like a whole day, and then I can spend another whole day. It's what happens on the other side, even when somebody else is organising it for you, takes so much time. And it is, yeah.
And Richard, do you want to respond with comment?
I was having coffee with a very respected poet about 2 years ago, and we were writing a similar sort of project, and she was talking about how we had created fiction based on traumatic aspects of history. It's historical fiction that has a family slant to it. It has bits of family story that weave through it. And the whole ramification of that conversation was sometimes things are too personal to share. And obviously she's won awards all around the world. She's got books published everywhere. She's really beautiful people. And apart from being really successful, but very beautiful people. And she was just saying how, despite the fact that her publishers had encouraged her and had, you know, supported her to write this work. She's pulled. She's pulled it because to live through the publication and the promotion and the questions is a very difficult thing. And I've been sitting on quite a decent book for 5 years now. That's complete. That's had interest from agents, all that sort of stuff. And I'm sitting there going, is this too hard a thing for me to promote? Is this too hard a thing for me to share with the world, for me to live that sharing? Because it's not just the book. If it was just sort of like I put the book out there and you could find its audience, go, grow up, child, go and grow legs and do your thing, that would be completely different. But that's not what the job is.
I think exactly what Januta is saying. It is quite a tough gig, but we make it sound like a lot of hard work, and it is a lot of hard work. So you've really got to want it. And for me, the reasons were very personal, to live through this, through what I'm living now, to write it, to relive it, to cry about it again and again and again and again. So in some ways it will be great when the publicity finishes and I'm not promoting the book anymore, because I'm not promoting trauma, but I'm walking you along the trauma that I experienced. But in saying that, and I said this yesterday, after my husband died, after I found that I couldn't teach anymore in a school, I really began to wonder where my relevance was. And I said this, so anyone who was here yesterday, I apologise. I really wondered where my relevance was. I felt I couldn't work full time. All I wanted to do was write this story out. I needed to get it on the page. I needed to make sense of what had happened in Grenada, because I could never capture it in my head. And I felt like I was responsible for what happened. So by putting it on the page and then what happened afterwards, it did help me make sense of it. But also I felt at the end it gave me a reason to get up every morning, it gave me relevance to myself, and I felt like I'd achieved something. And I really needed to do that after all the terrible, terrible things that happened. And then I felt so grateful to Alan and Unwin for saying they would publish it, that I made that decision. No matter what happened, I was going to promote this book 100%, because not only does it mean that I might have a second book deal, but it means that what they showed to me, their trust in me, that needs to be repaid. And the way I can repay that is by putting myself out there for as long as they want me to. And so it's like honouring a contract. That's how I see it.
I was going to say also, Karen, to hand over to you, can you also talk a little bit about, as a female writer of speculative fiction for young kids, you must know a lot about the industry, where its history and women writers in that genre, and we're also talking about women writing genre and indie publishing, that connection too.
Well, indie publishing is very exciting at the moment. When I got into it a few years ago, when I put out my first book, I was almost, I didn't like to tell people I was an indie publisher. This is so humiliating, I don't have a publisher, oh my god, I'm such a failure. I quickly learned that that wasn't the case. If you've done it the right way and you've gone out and you've got an editor and you've been through the process and you've got a good product, and if you can get reviews, I got reviews in the Sydney Morning Herald and the Best of Science Fiction and Fantasy magazine, and things like that make you, I know it's a validation and, getting a tick from somebody else, but you sort of need that too when you're an indie publisher, because you're doing everything by yourself. So it's nice to have a community. There's a very strong indie community. There's a lot of women writing, and really savvy women. They're artistic women. They've got websites and they get out and they create their author persona. Like the romance industry is just amazing. Like they're making millions of dollars with their ebooks that they write every couple of months, because they almost make themselves a character. Some of them, particularly American women, they've got their websites up and they're this fabulous author, and their readers have a sort of magical idea of them, I suppose. And so they have mailing lists and all the rest of it. But as far as the speculative fiction goes, I think it has opened it up to a wider range of voices, being able to publish your own stuff. So I was saying before that the biggest names are now African American women and the women from Nigeria, and so there are a lot of topics being covered that the publishers mightn't have touched before, and that's really exciting. I think it gives us so much freedom. That's the thing I've found through indie publishing is the freedom. You know, you don't know if people are necessarily going to buy it and read it. That's a gamble that you take, but there's nobody stopping you. You can write whatever you like. It's good. You don't have to have someone tick the box for you, and that's been really great.
I think indie publishing is a really viable avenue in all its forms, all the way from I'm publishing my own work to I'm working with a small press. I think it's a powerful thing. It invests power in the author, and I think for women that power to be yourself and express yourself is really important. You can choose what you want to say and how you want to say it. I've worked in industry writing for industry, as well as I've done so many bits and pieces. But I've worked in, and when you're working in an industry, they always tell you what you write, and the ethics sometimes you can skate very close to the edge of an ethical line in your life when you don't have control. And I think the thing is, this festival is wonderful because it shows you that this is a respectable path and an intelligent path, and gives you the right and the opportunity to share what's uniquely yours, because nobody else has your voice. You're a powerful person, and your voice is needed. And I honestly believe, and I've seen this happen again and again, is that a book will always find its audience. It just really will. If you talk about it, it will slowly find its audience. And I think indie publishing, and I was really, really interested in Ingram Spark yesterday. I think with tools like that, you don't have to over-invest in the long burn.
And I'd like Susan to talk a little bit about the different publishing houses that she came up against when the book was new to be published, and you had big houses. So she'll talk a little bit about the big houses and why she chose Allen and Unwin.
Yeah, so if anyone's read anything about my book, it is very personal and very intimate. And there was one agent who was very interested straight away. I sent it to her. It didn't have the final third of the story, which is, in my mind, the most controversial part, but which people have not picked up on, thankfully. So she started sending it out all over the place, but she would take 3 months. So it would go to one publishing firm, and all the big publishing firms, the big 6, 10, however many there are. And we would wait for 3 months and go to an acquisition meeting, and then they would say, oh, yeah, it's not bad, but we've got another book like it, or whatever. Yeah. And this went on for, 12, 15 months. It was the longest time in my life. And then one publisher said to me, they found out about the last end of the story. They said, no, you've got to put that in. That brings the story back to where it starts. And I ummed and ahed ethically about that for about 6 months. Was I going to put that part of the story in? Have I appropriated somebody's life? Have I really betrayed somebody by putting this part of the story in? So I put the story in. I got that part of the story. I got a new agent who sent it out to 6 publishers. Allen and Unwin was the only independent publisher. They are a big independent publisher. The other publishers were very large. One of those publishers said, we want the book. We're going to go off the back of the Dirty John story, which was on Netflix last year or the year before. And I almost vomited. I can't tell you how sick that made me feel. And thank God Alan said, we'd like to take it too, because I knew from meeting with them that they were sensitive, they would stay true to the book, they would market it the way I wanted it. They didn't make me make any changes. I wish they'd edited more heavily. It kept coming back and I'm thinking, God, But anyway, they were happy with it and I'm really happy I went with them because they've treated the book with great respect and they've treated me with great respect.
All right, questions from the audience. Does anyone have, I've jumped around different issues and topics. Do you have any questions?
Did you find
That's okay.
did you find any issues in approaching people from being a woman, or was that like null and void? Was that not an issue?
That's probably used.
I think everybody knew straight away that it was a book with a market that was particularly female. I don't know how else to say this, but it's not a book that a man's going to pick up. Traditionally, it's about relationships, it's about, and I'm telling it as a 58-year-old woman, so there's a very specific market for my book, and I knew that market, so in some ways that was quite helpful, because I knew the market, I knew that women would associate with what I was talking about and would relate to what I was talking about, so if anything, being a woman is a good thing.
I haven't had any difference being a woman. Doing indie publishing, I don't think it makes that much difference. But I can see that the memoirs are really being picked up by publishers at the moment. I think it's an advantage being a woman if you're writing that sort of thing. So I don't think it's any less empowering.
My book skated the road between memoir and not memoir, and I was thoroughly told, you are a fiction writer, please write more fiction. And I find that through my experiences, I think the time when it was difficult to be a woman in publishing has passed. I really do find that's the case. The way people spoke to me in the 90s is very different to the way I get addressed in the 2020 and stuff like that. So I think that's resolved. I don't think we have that problem. I think the exception to that are minority women's voices that are in any way contentious. So if you've got a broad demographic and the readership is noticed, I think what we end up is what your experiences was with the Dirty John type idea. I think that can be misappropriated. I think that women who write in those sorts of areas are finding independent publishing a godsend.
I think contentious women's voices are selling now. Yeah, and diversity in women's voices are what publishers are looking for. So it's definitely not a disadvantage.
No, and someone said to me yesterday or the day before, we love how honest your voice is, how raw your voice is. You're actually telling the truth of what it's like to be a 50-plus woman in these situations. So that makes me really pleased.
And there was a question over here. Yes.
In writing a memoir, you're obviously writing a personal story. How does that then, how do you take it into the craft of writing, where you want to write beautifully, and do people then concentrate on the story, or do they concentrate on the craft of?
Thank you so much for that question. People kind of get pulled up by the story and they don't go any further. Everyone talks about, God, this is an amazing story, blah, blah, blah. So I'm really grateful when someone will take that next step and talk about the quality of the writing, because like Danuta, I tried to skate the line between memoir and making it a story that people could enjoy and people could read, and that takes good writing. And so I would love more people to talk about the quality of the writing, to be honest, because people just can't seem to get past the story.
Do you want to say something about writing?
Craft of writing.
Craft of writing for children, especially.
Well, words have always been my thing, so I actual craft of writing. I'm doing a PhD in creative English at the moment. Writing for children, I don't think is all that much different, except you have to keep their attention. So the Kalika magic stories are certainly a lot more direct in the plot. I don't go off on meandering descriptions too much, like I would get away with an adult book. So I think it's been a good training ground to actually get a really tight story, to learn how to really keep the attention of the reader. I'm now writing adult mythic fantasy, and the training I've had with the kids' books it's been fantastic. So I feel like I'm ahead in what I'm doing because I've written these children's books. So I think, and often quite well-known writers will go back to writing children's books because it's maybe it's more fulfilling for them. I like to think so. Because it is a different feel, and especially in speculative fiction, you do tap into all that wonder and magic of your childhood. So, and that's a lovely thing to reconnect with. It is a definite. My novels are a lot about connection with yourself, connection with the land.
I think what Karen's saying is really important. Someone told me a long time ago that when you're 12 or 13, you are the truest version of who you are. So at that age, you're who you are, and then things get in the way and we get influenced and things change. And I really agree with that.
Well, I think that's why I started writing. I wanted to be that 12 or 13-year-old again. I wanted to get back into that that heart space, So that's been a gift.
Any other questions? Yeah?
Could you offer some advice on how you might market yourself, how you might push your book forward? It's not entirely safe for you to do it. For example, if you're writing about domestic violence.
So the question is how you might market the book if perhaps its focus is on a very difficult or sort of delicate topic like domestic violence, per se.
Oh, me. Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry. I think community. Having a strong community around you. Having friends around you that kind of act a bit like a shield. Because you're going to be brave, honey. You're going to have to be very, very brave to be that voice. The power that you have to express, you just need the people around you that help you be powerful. And there are other options. I mean, people still publish anonymously. I think I read something a few years ago, and one of the biggest European authors coming out of Italy, I think, she writes in English, and nobody knows who she is. No one knows who she is, even the people who know her. Yeah, no one knows her. Be her.
Susan, do you have something to say about difficult topics and marketing?
There's a section at the end of my book which, I not only did I agonise over it because I was afraid that I was appropriating somebody else's story, but also it goes a little bit, I thought it was a little bit controversial in terms of at the end of where I am now, I understand perhaps what happened with a more forgiving eye. Looking at that section of the story, I went backwards, forwards, backwards, forwards, backwards, forwards. Spoke with my best friend for hours and hours, weeks about it. Spoke with all my friends and the people I felt had knowledge in the area. And everyone said to me, no, you're being a little bit oversensitive about it. I think you should just go with it. It's your story. And we said it yesterday. Write the story you are afraid to write. Because that is the story that will touch people because you're there saying something that nobody else is saying. And that's really, really important. I just got shivers talking to you. I think it's really important that you just go with it. Sorry. Maybe that's not the best advice. It is hard. It's really hard. And I'm waiting for somebody to hit me over the head with that last section of my book. I'm waiting for it. So I've prepared my answers ahead of time So I know what I'm going to say when somebody hits me over the head with it, because it will happen. Yeah, preparation, practicing your responses.
I was just going to say, I suppose it's a little bit different if you're actually in a physically dangerous situation. That's when you'd need the community around, or a
I had a lady when I went to do my research in Germany for my book, and she was the scholar who actually found the concentration camp where the babies were being murdered. And when she was doing her research, you couldn't access her anymore. You could only access her through a intermediary, and she'd only come if she felt safe. And this little septuagenarian woman with 2 canes. And I was sitting there, and she's still writing these contentious things where she was still being, she would still get death threats from neo-Nazis about what she was writing. And she was still doing that bravely. And I asked her, how did she manage it? And she said, because the work has to be done. And she had the space and the ability to do that work where other people couldn't. So, you know, there's a real privilege in being a voice. And, yeah, you're obviously very well loved. Because if you can get to the point where you can write the book, you've obviously been nurtured to the point where you can write it. And you just need to trust that that nurture will continue to support you.
And probably, you know, the old adage, expect the unexpected. So that Susan was talking, she'll talk a little bit now about, you know, the polarised reaction to the adoption in her. And don't forget, you know, social media, it's just such a brutal platform because it's so immediate. You know, it's just, yeah, desktop warrior behaviour. So do you want to chat about that polarised reaction?
So I really felt that the last section of the book was the book that I was going to be hit over the head with from other people. So maybe it's good no one's gotten beyond the story. But, and that's about domestic violence, and that's about a crime against a particular woman called Caroline who lived in the highlands of New Guinea. So I thought that was going to be the controversial. The bit that's turned out to be controversial is the first section, which is about how I was adopted. And the reason I wrote that section is because who I was held back from me very willfully for over 20 years. And I couldn't understand why, and this is me talking at an emotional level, I could not understand why the rights of the birth mother were held in a higher category than the rights of the child that had been given up for adoption. So why, I couldn't understand why my birth mother had the right to keep her identity secret, but that meant my identity was kept secret as well. So why were my rights less? So I started writing the story very angry. I was very angry, and it took me a long time to discover the information that I needed. And that is where the controversy has come. So someone from an adoption agency emailed my publicist the other day and said, would Susan be willing to come and talk at our meeting? You know, where there's lots of people who've been adopted or who have given children up for adoption. And she said, oh, and by the way, you might want to look at our Facebook page. Oh my God. So there I was, being torn apart because I'd put my birth mother on the slab. Fair enough. But there were all these assumptions being made out of context. So no one had read the book. They'd just read 300 words in an article and went to town on me, basically because of that. I went to another adoption site where it was basically populated by people who'd been adopted out. And there I was a hero in a red cape. You're amazing. You're telling the story from the other side. So thank God there was balance, because that allowed me to go, right, okay, just leave that alone. Everyone's going to have an opinion. You can't change it.
Can I just say something on that? I always remember when Helen Garner put out the first stone, and she was stopped by a reporter who asked, people are saying
X, Y, and Z about the university students and their accusation of the professor who was up for sexual assault. You know, what do you think about that? And her reply was, my response is, they might want to read my book. So that's always a good line, you know.
Any more questions at all? A few minutes left.
Is there a fine line that you have to walk between journalism and fantasy? How does that line work through finding the truth? All of you.
I think there are many parts to the truth. So I think whatever is comfortable for you. I wouldn't call my writing journalism in any way. I mean, there is research behind it, but it's fantasy, mythic fiction. So the truth in it comes from what I find in my heart when I'm writing it. So it's not a factual sort of story. So I think if that sort of writing works for you, then you'll find the truth in that. If you're going to write realism, then it's going to be a little bit more journalistic because you have to actually follow up the setting, the facts. If you're writing memoir, well, it's a very personal story. So, and often people can write that completely from their own perspective. Susan has, but you're not so concerned about telling the whole story. I don't know. How did you feel in that? I don't know enough about memoir to say that.
Yeah, for me it was a fine line. So to discover what happened in New Guinea, which is the last part of the story, I had to go to New Guinea and I had to do research online to find the appeal case, which was buried in 1979 in some very, very obscure law journal from the Pacific Islands. So for me the truth was a combination of the appeal, reading that case online, my husband's family, who I spoke to and I suppose interviewed in a little way like a reporter, and my own sense of the story. So in that way I guess it was, you skated between the three areas. Does that answer your question?
Just on that section of Susan's book, she was quite grilled, I felt, by a reporter who was really questioning her belief of the end of the end of the book, and it's like, it's who she's talking about. And I was like, I just stopped in the middle of my lounge and going, shut up, it's her memoir, you know. And as Marianne Halligan says in the opening page of one of her, she has written several life story books, and the opening says, my sisters will disagree with this, but they have their own story and they can write their own book. This is my book.
There are, from lots of different perspectives, my essay form is called a Victor Critical Essay. So I specialise in weaving fact, philosophy, and lyric prose in communicative style. And the thing is, there's two things that I really want to share. One is, the pen and the paper has its own voice and it may not be yours. The number of times I've sat down to go, I'm going to write this, and it just wouldn't come out. Something comes out, it's kind of like in the same swimming pool, but it's not what I was going to write. And I think in doing that and having being comfortable allowing that to happen allows you to reveal a truth to yourself that you did not know you knew. And that's a really potent thing. And then that becomes a potent thing for other people, because when you're surprising yourself, believe it or not, you're surprising everybody else. And the thing I suppose the thing I like the most about me as a writer is I've got really good skills, and being hit over the head to get really good skills, that's wonderful, because it means I almost can be removed from the literary equation and I can allow things to happen on a page that I did not think could happen, and then I can be stunned and I can be enamoured by it. So the thing about, the other thing I wanted to share is that my novel, which was written for a PhD, was in an area that skates very close to memoir, but it was not a memoir, it was actual novel. And the truth of the matter is, people thought my fictional writing was real, and my non-fiction writing was not real. And so I'd get questions about the details of different characters saying, well, who is this and who is that in your life? I'm like going, it's a novel, it is imaginary. And then I'd be told, that is just so completely realistic. I'm like going, that was formed on my bed at 3 a.m. in the morning. And it's sort of like, so not only is this a whole blurry thing, sometimes you don't even know where the lines are blurring.
I find that I write my best fiction if I'm not thinking at all, really. And there is a state they call flow, if you read all about that, where you're just going, the voice is coming through you. I spend a lot of time at the river at Dungog with the trees, the birds, and by the time I've sat there for an hour or so, I've got out of my own way. So in the mornings, I used to, I've not been very diligent lately, but write morning pages, which is just 3 pages as soon as you get up of anything, just guff, clear your head. And I got that from a book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, which is a lovely book to look at if you're reigniting your creativity. And so you get out of your own way, and then the words come in from, and you don't know where they're coming from sometimes, and that's when, and you feel it, it's such a buzz, it's like a sense of ecstasy, and that's when you go, this is going to work, I really am writing.
It is a beautiful time to write, is that first wakening in the morning before all the to-do lists come in.
Can I make a selfless plug? Because I'm running something this year that makes me really, really excited. When I came back from Europe in 2009, I had to really scrap my PhD and rewrite the entire novel. Because, it's a story and sometimes they can only be told once well. And there's a monastery up in Stroud, which is a mud brick monastery made by the Sisters of St. Clair, and and I booked myself there for a week. And in that week I wrote 23,000 words and redesigned my entire project. And in September this year, I've booked 7 days out to run a retreat. If anybody wants to go long and deep in this beautiful rural setting, you get away from everything. You have that quiet for a week. It takes about 3 days to really get into it, and then the dam just breaks and the stuff just flows.
Yeah, I think having the space to write is something Virginia Woolf always talked about, a room of one's own. And I think maybe that is something that comes back to women having that now, whereas in the past perhaps we didn't so much.
Just end on that, but can you just tell us what the rest of the year has in store for you in world literature?
Well, I'm still working on this PhD, so I'll be reading and driving my husband crazy. But I also need to finish the last book in my Kalika Magic series, because I've actually got parents coming up to me saying, my child is very upset you haven't written the last book, so I'm getting a little bit of pressure there, which is lovely. So I'm going to try and squeeze that in. I've written half of it. And I need to finish it for me. I need to know where the story ends. And so I've got to write a novel for the PhD, an exegesis, the Kalika book, and do some marketing. And visit my 4 kids occasionally.
And Susan, where does your journey take you? Is there an end to this? Like you can already see, or no? In terms of the book.
So technically, the last thing that's booked this year is in June, at the end of June. And I have 50,000 words written on my new novel, which is based fiction, faction, about the journalists who were executed by the Indonesian army in Balobo in 1975. And so there, the scaling will be very interesting because it's close enough, I feel, and people still feel very passionate about it. I'm going to have to tread really carefully in the way I do that. So that's the background, the setting of the novel. So I'm hoping to go to Timor. There's the fort where the journalists were killed, were executed, and you can actually stay there in the middle of Timor. And I think writing there for a week or two would, I just can't imagine what it's going to be like. So that's, I'm hoping to find some space July, August to do that. That would be great.
Oh, well, on that note, thank our panel.
Can I just make a comment, an observation, rather than a question? It's about Susan's book. And I love the way Susan said, people get caught up in the story, and I wish you'd look at the brilliance of the writing, which it is brilliant. But I think the very reason people get caught up in the story is the writing. You know, you bring us on a journey, you take us on a journey, and that is your writing. It is the bliss of your writing. It's the construction of your writing that takes us there.
Thank you so much. that's the best thing anybody can hear.
Brilliant writing goes, in a sense, unnoticed because it's brilliant.
Yes,
You instantly notice when something is poorly written.
Yes.
Can I say on that level that Shakespeare is the proof of the pudding?
Of every point we've made today.